I'm Eleanor, 67 years old, and I've spent my entire life making sure my daughter Stephanie would never want for anything. As a widow, I worked double shifts, skipped vacations, and postponed my own dreams to give her the best life possible. Last week, she invited me to a dinner party at her beautiful home. What should have been a lovely evening turned into the most humiliating night of my life. She treated me like her personal servant in front of everyone. I kept quiet that night, but what I did the next morning left her bank account empty. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to hear more real-life stories from someone who's lived through it all. My story begins in Lansing, Michigan, where I settled with my husband Robert shortly after we married. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were comfortable in our modest 3-bedroom home on Maple Street. Robert worked at the local manufacturing plant, while I built my career as a registered nurse at Lansing General Hospital. Our life was simple but happy, especially after Stephanie was born when I was 29. Robert was the love of my life, a gentle man with a booming laugh who adored our daughter. The memory of him pushing 5-year-old Stephanie on the backyard swing set, her giggles filling the air, is something I still cherish. But life has a way of appending even the most perfect happiness. When Stephanie was 12, Robert suffered a massive heart attack at work. The doctors said it was instant. He never felt pain. That was the only comfort I had as I found myself a widow at 41 with a preteen daughter to raise alone. The first year after Robert died was a blur of grief, paperwork, and learning to be both mother and father to Stephanie. Robert had a small life insurance policy that paid off our mortgage, but it wasn't enough for much else. I had to make difficult decisions quickly. I took on double shifts at the hospital, working as many hours as they would allow me. I specialized in geriatric care, and my patients became almost like extended family. Eleanor has healing hands, Mrs. Finley, one of my regular patients used to say. What my patients didn't see were the long hours away from home, the missed school plays, the quick meals I'd prepare in advance for Stephanie to heat up. I'd come home at midnight to find math homework on the kitchen table that I couldn't help with because I was too exhausted. But I made it a point never to miss our Sunday tradition, making pancakes together and talking about our week. My parents, Harold and Virginia, lived about an hour away and would help when they could, taking Stephanie for weekends sometimes. They weren't in great health themselves, but they adored their granddaughter. My mother would send care packages with homemade cookies and notes telling Stephanie how proud she was of her. "You're working too hard, Eleanor," my father would say during their visits. "You need to take care of yourself too." But how could I slow down? Stephanie was showing such promise in school. Her teachers praised her intelligence and ambition. She joined the debate team, played soccer, and maintained a 4.0 GPA. I was determined that my financial circumstances wouldn't limit her future. Every extra penny went into her college fund. I drove the same car for 15 years, patching it up rather than replacing it. I turned down opportunities for advancement at work that would have required more education, because I couldn't afford both my courses and her future tuition. When my coworkers went on vacations, I picked up their shifts. When they bought new furniture, I reupholstered mine. It was all for Stephanie. During her teen years, Stephanie was generally a good kid, strong-willed and occasionally moody, but what teenager isn't? There were moments of entitlement that worried me, like when she complained about not having the latest designer jeans, or when she rolled her eyes at our cable-less television. But these seemed like normal teenage grievances, not character flaws. "Mom, Jessica's parents are taking her to Paris for spring break," she once said, disappointment evident in her voice. "We can't afford Paris, sweetheart, but maybe we can do a weekend in Chicago?" I'd offered, knowing even that would stretch my budget thin. Despite these occasional tensions, we remained close. She'd often sit on my bed late at night when I got home from work, telling me about her day, her friends, her dreams. I treasured those moments. When the college acceptance letters started arriving, I held my breath. Stephanie had her heart set on Northwestern University, which offered her a partial scholarship based on her excellent academic record. I still remember her jumping up and down in our kitchen, waving the acceptance letter. "I got in, Mom. I got in." I hugged her tight, swallowing my anxiety about the remaining costs. Northwestern was expensive even with a scholarship. The financial aid package wasn't enough. After crunching numbers late into the night for weeks, I made a decision that many would call foolish. I took out a second mortgage on our home. My financial advisor, Frank, tried to talk me out of it. "Eleanor, you're putting your retirement at risk," he warned. "Frank, my daughter won't get another chance at an education like this. I'll figure out retirement later." And so, Stephanie went off to Northwestern. I worked even more hours, picking up night shifts and weekend duties to make the mortgage payments. When she called needing money for books or a winter coat or sorority fees, I never said no. I wanted her to focus on her studies, not worry about money like I did every day. Looking back, I wonder if this was where I started to go wrong. By never letting her experience financial strain or responsibility. But at the time, all I could think was that I was giving her what I never had: freedom to pursue her dreams without the weight of financial worry. Stephanie graduated from Northwestern with honors, and I couldn't have been prouder watching her walk across that stage in her cap and gown. All those years of sacrifice seemed worth it when she secured a position at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago right out of college. Her starting salary was more than I made after 20 years of nursing. "You did it, honey," I told her, hugging her tight after the ceremony. "You're going to have the life I always wanted for you." "Thanks to you, Mom," she replied, and I treasured those words, not knowing how our relationship would evolve in the coming years. For the first few years of her career, Stephanie seemed grounded. She'd call regularly, visit on holidays, and even send me little gifts from her business trips. But as she climbed the corporate ladder, something began to shift. Her calls became less frequent, her visits shorter and often canceled last minute. The humble gratitude she once expressed was gradually replaced by a subtle, but unmistakable condescension toward my simpler life. It was during this time that Stephanie met Brandon Murray at a corporate event. He came from a wealthy family with connections throughout Chicago's business world. Handsome, well-educated, and ambitious, Brandon seemed to accelerate the changes I was noticing in my daughter. Their courtship was a whirlwind of exclusive restaurants, weekend getaways, and social events with people who had influence and money. When Stephanie called to announce their engagement after just 8 months of dating, her excitement was palpable through the phone. "Mom, you won't believe the ring. It's 3 carats emerald cut with baguettes on the side. Brandon says it's been in his family for generations." I was happy for her, truly, but I also felt the growing distance between us. Not just geographically, but in lifestyle and values. The wedding planning quickly became a source of stress. The venue they chose was a historic mansion on Chicago's North Shore. The flowers alone cost more than my annual property taxes. "Mom, we need to discuss your contribution," Stephanie said during one of our planning calls. "Brandon's parents are covering most of it, but traditionally, the bride's family pays for the dress and rehearsal dinner." I had been saving for this moment since Stephanie was born, putting aside what little I could. I had $15,000 in a special account. A fortune to me. It vanished into the costs of her designer gown and a rehearsal dinner for 60 people at an upscale restaurant. "This is the bare minimum, Mom," she said when I hesitantly mentioned the amount. "Brandon's family is spending 10 times that." I took out a small loan to cover it, not telling her that I'd be making payments for the next 3 years. At the wedding, I felt out of place among Brandon's family and their social circle. Stephanie had insisted I buy a new dress for the occasion, even sending me links to options that wouldn't embarrass her. I chose the most affordable one, though it still cost more than I'd ever spent on clothing for myself. "You look nice, Eleanor," Brandon's mother Susan said with a tight smile at the reception, "though you might want to consider highlights next time. They do wonders for hiding gray." After the wedding, Stephanie and Brandon bought a stunning home in Lake Forest, an affluent suburb north of Chicago. When I visited for the first time, I was struck by the grandeur: 5 bedrooms, a home theater, a wine cellar, and a backyard that seemed to stretch forever. "It's beautiful, honey," I said, trying to hide my discomfort. "It's just a starter home," Stephanie replied dismissively. "We'll upgrade once we have kids." During that visit, I noticed how Stephanie watched me anxiously as I walked through her home, as if she was afraid I might break something. When I offered to help cook dinner, she quickly steered me away from the kitchen. "The countertops are imported marble, Mom. Let's just order in." Years earlier, I had opened a joint bank account with Stephanie when she went to college. It was meant to be a way for me to quickly transfer money to her in emergencies. Even after she started her career, I continued to deposit cash gifts for birthdays, Christmas, and occasionally, just because. It was my way of showing love, of still providing for her despite her success. What I didn't know until much later was that Stephanie had been regularly withdrawing small amounts from this account without mentioning it to me. Not that she needed my permission, it was a joint account, but the lack of acknowledgement hurt when I eventually discovered it. As Stephanie and Brandon's social status rose, my role in their lives seemed to diminish. I was no longer the supportive mother, but an awkward connection to a past Stephanie seemed increasingly eager to distance herself from. "Mom, when you visit next month, maybe we could update your wardrobe?" she suggested during one phone call. Brandon's colleagues will be around, and appearance matters in his industry. Another time, when I mentioned potentially selling my house to move closer to them, her response was telling. "Actually, Mom, the schools near you aren't that great. We'd probably still raise our kids here even if you moved. And real estate in Lake Forest is probably out of your price range anyway." The pattern continued: subtle put-downs, canceled plans, critical comments about my home, my clothes, my manners. The daughter who once sat on my bed sharing her teenage dreams now seemed embarrassed by my very existence. Despite this, I continued to make deposits into our joint account. $500 here, $1,000 there. When they were looking to buy their house, I contributed $25,000 toward their down payment, nearly half of my remaining savings. Stephanie's thank you was perfunctory, and she never mentioned it again. I told myself this was normal. Children grow up, build their own lives, develop different tastes. But deep down I knew something wasn't right. The disconnect between my sacrifices and her growing entitlement created a wound that was slowly widening. Last month, Stephanie called with an unusual request. Brandon was trying to secure a partnership with some important business associates, and they were hosting a dinner party at their home. She wanted me to come. "It would mean a lot to have you there, Mom," she said, sounding more enthusiastic about seeing me than she had in years. These people are really important to Brandon's career. I was touched. Despite our strained relationship, she wanted me present for this significant event. Perhaps she was finally seeing me as someone valuable to have around, not just an obligation. "Of course I'll be there, sweetheart. Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," she replied. "Oh, and Mom? Could you come a bit early? I might need help with a few things." I spent the next week preparing. I bought a new blouse, navy blue with a subtle pattern, tasteful but not flashy. I had my hair styled at the local salon, splurging on a trim and set. I even practiced small talk topics that might interest Brandon's colleagues. And despite Stephanie saying not to bring anything, I baked my special apple crumble, the one that had been Stephanie's favorite dessert growing up. The day of the dinner, I arrived at their Lake Forest home at 4:30, as requested, carefully carrying my dessert. Stephanie answered the door in a sleek black dress, her hair perfectly styled. Her smile faltered when she saw the dessert container in my hands. "Oh, Mom, I told you not to bring anything. We have a professional caterer handling everything. It's just your favorite apple crumble," I said, trying to keep my voice light. I thought it might be a nice personal touch. She took the container with a sigh. "I guess we could put it in the kitchen as a backup." Inside, their home had been transformed. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, candles waited to be lit, and a bartender was setting up in the corner of the living room. The dining table, extended to seat 12, was set with china I'd never seen before. "The caterers are in the kitchen," Stephanie said, leading me through the house. "I need to finish getting ready. Could you just check that they have everything they need? And maybe help them plate the appetizers?" Before I could respond, she was heading upstairs, leaving me standing awkwardly in the entrance to the bustling kitchen. The caterers, a chef and 2 assistants, barely acknowledged me as they worked. I set my dessert on a counter and tried to make myself useful, asking if they needed help. "We're fine, ma'am," the chef said, barely looking up from the delicate hors d'oeuvres he was arranging. For the next hour, I hovered in the kitchen, occasionally peeking into the living room where Stephanie was now directing the placement of additional candles and adjusting flower arrangements. Twice I offered to help, and twice she found reasons for me to return to the kitchen. When Brandon arrived home, He greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek before being pulled away by Stephanie for a critical decision about wine selection. I remained in the kitchen, feeling increasingly like an intruder rather than family. At 6:30, the doorbell rang announcing the first guests. I smoothed my blouse and prepared to join the gathering, but Stephanie intercepted me in the hallway. "Mom, would you mind helping serve the champagne? The bartender is busy with cocktails." And so it began. While Stephanie and Brandon greeted their guests, 4 couples, all impeccably dressed and exuding confidence, I circulated with a tray of champagne flutes. No one seemed to notice that I wasn't a hired server until Stephanie finally gestured toward me during a lull in conversation. "Everyone, this is my mother Eleanor," she said quickly before turning back to the woman beside her to continue their conversation about a recent gallery opening.
No proper introduction.
No mention of my nursing career or my role in her life. Just my mother Eleanor. As if that explained my presence with the serving tray. When we moved to the dining room, I naturally assumed I would be sitting with everyone else. Instead, Stephanie pulled me aside. "Mom, we're 1 chair short with the caterer's assistant calling in sick. Would you mind helping serve the courses and eating in the kitchen? It would be such a help." The request knocked the wind out of me. I was good enough to serve but not to sit with them? I wanted to object, to assert my place as her mother, not her staff. But looking at her pleading expression and aware of the important guests just feet away, I nodded. "Of course, honey. Whatever you need." Throughout dinner, I became Stephanie's personal attendant. Every few minutes brought a new request. "Mom, we need more water at the table." "Mom, could you bring the next wine from the cellar? The Cabernet, not the Merlot." "Mom, Jeffrey's plate is empty. Can you check if there's more roast?" Each time she called me Mom in that commanding tone, the guests would glance at me with surprise or worse, pity. I noticed Brandon's discomfort, the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes when I placed a fresh bread basket near him. But he said nothing to intervene. I ate quick bites standing in the kitchen between serving duties. The caterers shot me sympathetic looks but were too professional to comment. I kept telling myself it was just one evening, that these connections were important for Brandon and Stephanie's future. The breaking point came during dessert. Not my apple crumble, which remained untouched in the kitchen, but an elaborate tiramisu from a downtown patisserie. One of the guests, a distinguished-looking man named Richard, asked about Brandon and Stephanie's recent trip to Portugal. As Stephanie described the coastal towns they'd visited, I smiled and added, "That sounds like the area my grandparents came from." They always described the most beautiful blue tiles on the buildings. The table fell silent. Stephanie's face tightened as she turned to me. "Mom, don't interrupt adult conversation. And we need coffee served. Could you check on that?" Don't interrupt adult conversation. As if I were a child, not a 67-year-old woman. As if I hadn't raised her, sacrificed for her, loved her unconditionally. In that moment, something broke inside me. A final thread of justification for her behavior that I had been desperately clinging to. I served the coffee without a word, fighting back tears. For the remainder of the evening, I moved silently through the house, clearing plates, refreshing drinks, and fading into the background as Stephanie had clearly intended all along. When the guests finally departed around midnight, full of compliments about the exquisite evening, I began cleaning up despite the caterers insisting they would handle it. "Dinner was lovely," I said quietly to Stephanie as she kicked off her heels in the living room. "Your friends seem very nice." "They're not friends, Mom. They're business associates." She sighed, looking around at the remnants of the party. "Thank you for helping. I couldn't have managed without you." It should have been a moment of connection, of gratitude. Instead, her words felt hollow, an afterthought to an evening where she had reduced me to staff. "I should head home," I said, gathering my purse. "It's late." "Drive safely," Brandon offered, the first words he'd directed at me in hours. Stephanie was already checking her phone, distracted. "Text me when you get home so I know you're safe." I nodded and left without another word. In my car, the tears I had been holding back all evening finally came. They weren't just tears of humiliation but of grief for the daughter I thought I had raised, for the relationship I had believed in despite growing evidence to the contrary, and for the woman I had allowed myself to become in Stephanie's world, invisible except when useful. The drive home from Lake Forest to my modest house in Lansing took just over an hour, but that night it felt eternal. Rain had started to fall, matching my tears as I replayed the evening's events. The windshield wipers kept steady rhythm with the thoughts pounding in my head. How had we gotten here? When had my bright, loving daughter transformed into someone who could treat me with such casual disregard? And perhaps more importantly, when had I become someone who would accept it? At home, I went through the motions of my nighttime routine on autopilot, hanging up my barely worn blouse, washing my face, brewing a cup of chamomile tea I knew I wouldn't drink. Sleep was out of the question. Instead, I found myself pulling out the old photo albums from the hall closet, their covers dusty from neglect. There was Stephanie at 5, missing her front teeth, grinning proudly in her first day of kindergarten outfit, a denim jumper I'd sewn myself because we couldn't afford the store-bought one she wanted. Stephanie at 12, standing beside her father's grave, her face solemn but her hand clutching mine tightly. Stephanie at 18, radiant in her Northwestern sweatshirt the day her acceptance letter arrived. "We did it, Mom," she had said that day, including me in her achievement because she understood, then, that her opportunities had been built on my sacrifices. When had that understanding faded? When had we become just I in her mind? I flipped through more recent photos: her college graduation, her wedding day, housewarming at the Lake Forest home. In each successive image, I noticed something I hadn't seen before: the growing physical distance between us in the posed shots, my increasingly tentative smile, her body language angled away from mine. The photographic evidence of our drifting relationship was undeniable. Around 3 in the morning, I moved from the photo albums to my home office, where I kept my financial records. I'm old-fashioned about money. I keep paper statements, carefully filed by month and year. I began pulling folders, creating a visual record of my financial support of Stephanie over the years. Tuition payments, rent subsidies during her early career, the wedding contribution, the house down payment gift, and most recently, the steady deposits into our joint account, money I could have used to repair my aging roof or replace my 15-year-old refrigerator, but instead sent to a daughter who made 4 times my income. The joint account statements revealed something else, something I'd noticed but had been unwilling to fully acknowledge. Small but regular withdrawals, $200 here, $500 there. Money flowing out to Nordstrom, to upscale restaurants, to a personal trainer. Stephanie had been using our joint account, the one I faithfully deposited gift money into, as her personal slush fund for luxuries. I calculated roughly that I had contributed over $150,000 to Stephanie's adult life, not including college. For someone who had never earned more than $75,000 a year as a nurse, who had scrimped and saved and gone without, this was an astronomical sum. And how had this generosity been repaid? With dismissal, embarrassment, and last night's ultimate indignity, being treated as the help. Dawn was breaking when I finally admitted to myself an uncomfortable truth. I had enabled this situation. My unwillingness to set boundaries, my desperate desire to be needed by my daughter, my guilt over the sacrifices she had experienced after Robert died. All of it had contributed to Stephanie's entitled attitude toward me and my resources. I made myself a strong cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching the sunrise through the window that needed recaulking, another home repair I deferred to help Stephanie. The joint account currently held just over $43,000. Money I had been saving for years, intended eventually to help with a grandchild's education or perhaps a family emergency. Money Stephanie clearly viewed as an extension of her own resources, available for whatever passing desire struck her fancy. The clarity that came with this realization was both painful and liberating. I had been trying to buy my daughter's love and respect with financial support, and in doing so, had taught her that neither I nor my contributions were particularly valuable. The irony was bitter but undeniable. My phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. "Thanks again for your help last night. Everyone was impressed with the dinner." Not, "I'm sorry for how I treated you." Not, "I appreciate you." Just satisfaction that her social performance had achieved its desired effect. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable just 24 hours earlier. I would reclaim not just my money but my dignity. I would create a consequence that Stephanie couldn't ignore or dismiss. one that might finally break through the entitled bubble she had built around herself. I would close our joint account and transfer all funds to my personal account. Not out of spite or revenge, but as a long overdue boundary, a statement that I was a person worthy of basic respect, not a resource to be tapped and discarded at convenience. My hands shook as I typed out a simple note to myself, a commitment to follow through when the banks opened. This ends today. I love my daughter, but love without respect is damaging us both. I finally fell asleep as the morning light filled my bedroom, my decision made, my path clear for the first time in years. I awoke just after 9, groggy from my brief sleep but resolute. After a quick shower and a bowl of oatmeal, I dressed in a simple blouse and slacks and drove to the First National Bank of Lansing, where both my personal account and our joint account were held. The bank was quiet for a Tuesday morning. I took a number and waited, rehearsing what I would say. When my number was called, I approached the desk where Grace Harmon sat. Grace had been a bank manager there for over a decade, and we knew each other from community events and my occasional banking needs. "Eleanor, so nice to see you," she greeted me warmly. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath. I need to close a joint account and transfer the funds to my personal account. If Grace was surprised, she didn't show it. "Of course. I'll need your ID and the account information." As she processed my request, Grace maintained professional discretion, but I could feel her curiosity. After verifying my identification and confirming the account details, she looked up at me. "Eleanor, this is a significant amount of money. Are you sure you want to close the account entirely rather than just make a withdrawal?" "I'm sure," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "The joint account arrangement is no longer appropriate." Grace nodded, typing a few more commands into her computer. "The other account holder will be notified automatically when they next access online banking or attempt to use the account." "I understand. And you want the full balance of $43,275.82 transferred to your personal account?" "Yes." As Grace processed the transaction, a complex wave of emotions washed over me. Guilt, relief, anxiety, and underneath it all, a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. I was taking back control not just of my money but of my relationship with my daughter. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. "All done," Grace said, printing out a receipt and handing it to me. "The funds are now in your personal account, and the joint account has been closed." "Thank you, Grace." Her professional demeanor softened slightly. "Eleanor, I hope everything is okay." I managed a small smile. "It will be. Sometimes we need to make difficult choices for things to get better." I returned home and spent the day in a strange limbo, alternating between certainty that I had done the right thing and waves of doubt that had me reaching for the phone to call the bank and reverse my decision. But each time I wavered, I remembered Stephanie's voice. "Mom, don't interrupt adult conversation," and my resolve strengthened again. The call came at 1:37 p.m., just as I was making myself a sandwich for a late lunch. Stephanie's name flashed on my caller ID. I took another steadying breath and answered. "Hello, Mom." Stephanie's voice was high-pitched, almost frantic. "Did you know our joint account is empty? The app is saying there's no money and the account is closed. There must be some mistake." The moment of truth had arrived. "It's not a mistake, Stephanie. I closed the account this morning and transferred the funds to my personal account." There was a beat of stunned silence before the explosion. "You what? You can't do that. That's my money too. How could you just take it without talking to me first?" "It was my money, Stephanie. Money I earned and deposited for emergencies and important life events, not for personal trainers and shopping sprees at Nordstrom." Another shocked pause. "Have you been spying on my transactions? That's an invasion of privacy." "It's a joint account, Stephanie. The statements come to my house. I can't believe you would do this to me." Her voice had shifted from shock to fury. "After everything we've been through, after all these years of trusting each other, you just steal money from our account?" The irony of her claiming theft of my own money might have been amusing in other circumstances. Now it just confirmed how distorted our relationship had become. "I didn't steal anything, Stephanie. I reclaimed funds that I earned and deposited. Funds that you've been treating as your personal shopping account without so much as a thank you." Is this about last night? She demanded, her voice dropping slightly. Because if you were upset about helping with the dinner, you could have just said so instead of throwing this childish tantrum. Last night was a symptom, not the cause, I replied, surprised at how calm I felt. Last night you treated me like a servant in front of strangers after I've spent my entire life putting your needs before my own. But this isn't about one dinner party. It's about years of taking me for granted, of treating my financial support as your entitlement rather than my gift. I cannot believe you're doing this. Stephanie's voice cracked with emotion, though whether from anger or hurt I couldn't tell. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? I had automatic payments set up through that account. Of course, her first concern was practical inconvenience, not the broken relationship that had led to this point. You make 4 times what I ever earned, Stephanie. I'm sure you'll manage. You know what? Fine. Keep the money if it means that much to you. But don't expect to be welcome in my home again. Don't expect to be part of my life or any future children's lives. If money means more to you than family, then that's your choice. Her threat hit me like a physical blow. No matter how prepared I thought I was, hearing my only child threaten to cut me out of her life was devastating. But I had come too far to back down now. This isn't about money, Stephanie. It's about respect. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect, rather than what I can give or do for you, I'll be here. Don't hold your breath, she snapped, and then the line went dead. I set my phone down on the counter, my hands trembling. The sandwich I'd been making sat forgotten, bread drying in the afternoon air. I had known there would be fallout, had anticipated anger, but the reality of her reaction, the immediate leap to permanent estrangement, left me shaken. Had I made a terrible mistake? Had I just destroyed my relationship with my only child over money? No, I reminded myself firmly. Not over money. Over dignity. Over self-respect. Over years of enabling behavior that was harming us both. Still, as I sat alone in my kitchen, the future stretched before me like an uncertain road, foggy and possibly very lonely. I had taken a stand, but at what cost? And where would we go from here? 3 days passed without a word from Stephanie. I moved through my routine like a sleepwalker, volunteering at the hospital auxiliary, tending my garden, meeting my friend Judy for our weekly coffee. But inside I was in turmoil. I checked my phone constantly, both dreading and hoping for Stephanie's name to appear. On the 4th day, just after 2 p.m., my doorbell rang. When I opened it, I was shocked to find Brandon standing on my porch, his expression a mixture of discomfort and determination. Brandon, is everything all right? Is Stephanie okay? Immediate concern for my daughter overrode everything else. She's fine, Eleanor. Angry but fine. He shifted awkwardly. Can I come in? I think we need to talk. I stepped aside, puzzled by his unexpected visit. In all the years he'd been married to Stephanie, Brandon had never once come to see me alone. I led him to the living room, offering coffee which he declined. We sat facing each other, me on my well-worn recliner, him perched on the edge of the sofa. Stephanie doesn't know I'm here, he began, confirming my suspicion. She'd probably be furious if she did. Then why are you? I asked, genuinely curious. Brandon ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd noticed before. Because what happened at the dinner party was wrong, and how she's reacting now is wrong too. And I think we both know this isn't really about the money. His candor surprised me. No, it's not about the money. I should have said something that night, he continued, guilt evident in his voice. The way she was treating you. I was uncomfortable with it, but I didn't speak up. I've been uncomfortable with a lot of things, if I'm being honest. What do you mean? Brandon sighed deeply. Stephanie talks about you differently depending on who's around. To me, in private, she talks about how much she appreciates all you've done for her. But with friends or colleagues, it's different. She makes comments about having to overcome her background, or jokes about your home or clothes. It's like she's created 2 narratives. One where she's the loving daughter and another where she succeeded despite you, not because of you. His words stung, but they also clarified something I'd sensed but couldn't articulate. The inconsistency in Stephanie's behavior toward me wasn't just mood swings. It was a deliberate compartmentalization. I think she's ashamed, Brandon continued, his voice softer. Not of you exactly, but of where she came from. The modest upbringing. The struggle. It doesn't fit with the image she's trying to project. But why? I never taught her to be ashamed of our life. No, but you taught her to want more. And somewhere along the way, wanting more turned into being embarrassed by less. He looked around my simple living room with its dated furniture and family photos. For what it's worth, I think she's wrong. There's nothing here to be ashamed of. We sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of his insight. About the account, Brandon finally said. You were right to do what you did. Stephanie needs this wake-up call. We both make good money. The truth is, she doesn't need your financial help and hasn't for years. But she's gotten used to it. Expected it. I enabled that, I admitted. Maybe. But it's not too late to change the pattern. Before I could respond, the sound of a car door slamming came from outside. Through the front window, I saw Stephanie marching up my walkway, her face set in angry determination. That's Stephanie's car, Brandon said, standing quickly. I told her I was working from home today. She must have tracked my phone. The front door burst open without a knock. Stephanie stood in the entryway, her eyes moving from Brandon to me and back again. What is this? She demanded. Some kind of intervention? You're conspiring with my mother behind my back now. Brandon stood his ground. I'm not conspiring with anyone, Steph. I'm having an honest conversation, which is what we all need right now. In my mother's house? After what she did. After what I did. I found myself rising from my chair, my voice stronger than I expected. Stephanie, I've spent my entire adult life putting you first. I've supported you emotionally, financially, in every way I knew how. And how did you repay that at the dinner party? By treating me like hired help. By dismissing me in front of strangers. By making me feel worthless in your home. It was one dinner party. Stephanie threw her hands up in exasperation. One important night for Brandon's career. And you're acting like I committed some unforgivable sin. It wasn't just the dinner party, Brandon interjected quietly. And you know it. Stephanie whirled on him. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of our family being healthy. All of our family. He gestured to include me. Your mother deserves better than how you've been treating her. Oh, so you're the perfect son-in-law now? Where was all this concern when you let me put her to work serving your precious business associates? You're right, he acknowledged, surprising both of us. I should have said something that night. I was wrong not to. Stephanie's righteous anger seemed to falter in the face of his admission. She turned back to me, her expression a complex mixture of anger, hurt, and something else, perhaps a flicker of shame. Fine. So I asked you to help with a dinner party. That doesn't justify stealing $43,000 from me. I didn't steal anything, Stephanie, I replied evenly. I closed an account containing money that I earned and deposited. Money you've been treating as your personal spending fund, without so much as acknowledging where it came from. That account was for emergencies. Is a personal trainer an emergency? Is a weekend spa trip an emergency? Her face flushed. You've been monitoring my spending? That's invasive. No, it's being financially responsible. Something I clearly failed to teach you. Brandon moved to stand between us. Not taking sides but creating a calmer space. Let's all take a breath. We're talking in circles. There's nothing to talk about, Stephanie insisted, though some of the fire had gone out of her voice. She took the money. She broke my trust. And you broke mine, I replied, feeling tears well in my eyes despite my determination to remain composed. Every time you dismissed me, every time you made me feel less than in your life, every time you took without acknowledgement or gratitude. That dinner party wasn't an isolated incident, Stephanie. It was just the final straw. Something in my words or perhaps my tears seemed to penetrate Stephanie's defensive armor. She sank down onto the sofa, suddenly looking exhausted. I never meant to make you feel that way, she said quietly. But you did, Brandon said gently, sitting beside her. And it's been happening for a long time. Is that true? She asked me, vulnerability showing through her anger for the first time. Have I really been that terrible to you? The question opened a floodgate. I told her everything, how I felt when she criticized my home, my clothes, my manners. How it hurt when she canceled plans at the last minute. How I noticed her pulling away as her social status rose. How the dinner party had made me feel invisible and worthless after a lifetime of putting her needs first. As I spoke, something shifted in Stephanie's expression. The defensive anger gradually gave way to horror, then shame and finally grief. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down her face. "I didn't see it," she whispered. "I didn't want to see it. It was easier to think of you as just there, unchanging, a safety net. I'm a person, Stephanie. Your mother, yes, but a person with feelings and dignity. I know that." She wiped at her tears. "When did I become this person? This isn't who I wanted to be." Brandon put his arm around her shoulders, supportive but still firm. "We can do better. Both of us." Stephanie nodded, then looked at me directly. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The dinner party, the way I've been treating you, it's inexcusable." It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from her in years. Not a defensive, "I'm sorry you feel that way," but a real acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It wasn't enough to heal everything between us, but it was a start. "I accept your apology," I said carefully. "But Stephanie, things need to change between us. I can't go back to how things were." "I know," she nodded, sniffling. "I don't want to go back either. Not now that I see what I've been doing." We sat together, the three of us, talking honestly for the first time in years. There were more tears, more difficult admissions, moments of defensiveness that flared and subsided. But beneath it all was something I had almost given up hope for. A foundation for rebuilding based on truth rather than pretense. As evening approached, Brandon suggested they should head home, but with a promise that wasn't just an empty social nicety. "We'd like to come back this weekend," he said. "Maybe we could all go to dinner? A real dinner, where everyone sits at the table together." Stephanie nodded in agreement, her eyes red but clearer than they'd been in hours. "I'd like that, Mom. If you would." "I would," I replied, feeling cautiously hopeful for the first time in days. At the door, Stephanie hesitated, then stepped forward to hug me. Not the perfunctory embrace of recent years, but a real hug, tight and lingering. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. "I'm going to do better. I promise." "I love you too," I replied, holding her close and allowing myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we had found our way back to what mattered most. 2 months have passed since that confrontational afternoon in my living room. The journey from that day to now hasn't been smooth or simple, but it has been real in a way that our relationship hadn't been for years. We've been doing the hard work of rebuilding trust and establishing healthier patterns of interaction. A week after our confrontation, Stephanie suggested we try family therapy. I was surprised. Therapy wasn't something either of us had considered before. "I want to understand why I became this person," she told me. "And I want us to have tools to communicate better." We found Dr. Andrea Walker, a therapist specializing in family relationships. In our first session, Stephanie broke down completely when describing how she had treated me at the dinner party. "I keep replaying it in my head," she admitted through tears. "The looks on those people's faces when they realized she was my mother, not the hired help. They were embarrassed for her. And I just kept going, kept ordering her around like she was nothing to me." Dr. Walker guided us through painful conversations about expectations, boundaries, and the complicated emotions that underlie adult parent-child relationships. She helped me see how my well-intentioned financial support had become an unhealthy dynamic for both of us. "Eleanor," she said during one session, "giving continually without boundaries isn't actually generosity. It's a form of control, even if that wasn't your intention. And Stephanie, receiving without acknowledgement or reciprocity isn't just taking advantage. It's a way of avoiding the vulnerability of genuine gratitude." These weren't easy truths to face, but facing them together created a new foundation for our relationship. After our third therapy session, I made a decision about the money. I transferred $15,000 back to Stephanie's personal account, not because she needed it or had demanded it, but as a deliberate choice to contribute to her life in a healthier way. "This is a gift," I told her clearly. "Not an obligation, not a debt repayment. A gift from mother to daughter, given freely and with joy. She tried to refuse at first. "Mom, I don't deserve this after how I've treated you." "This isn't about deserving," I explained. "It's about me exercising my choice about my resources, rather than falling into old patterns where my giving and your receiving were both unconscious habits." She accepted then, with genuine gratitude rather than entitlement. The remaining money stayed in my account, where I've finally begun addressing long-deferred home repairs and even planning a small vacation for myself. My first in over a decade. Stephanie and Brandon have made changes too. They've scaled back some of their more extravagant spending, not because they need to financially, but because, as Stephanie put it, living with a little less stuff makes me more mindful of what really matters. Last weekend they hosted another dinner party, but this one was entirely different. I was introduced properly to each guest, my nursing career mentioned with pride, my role in Stephanie's success acknowledged openly. I sat at the table as an honored guest, not hidden away in the kitchen. And when one of Brandon's colleagues asked about my life, Stephanie fell silent, allowing me to tell my own story rather than narrating it for me. It wasn't perfect. I noticed moments when Stephanie's old habits threatened to surface. A flicker of impatience when I mentioned my modest neighborhood. A slight wince when I used the wrong fork for the salad. But she caught herself each time, the awareness in her eyes showing me that she was truly trying to change. After the guests left, we sat together in their living room, tired but content. "Thank you for giving me another chance," Stephanie said quietly. "I know I hurt you deeply." "We hurt each other," I acknowledged. "But we're finding a better way forward. Not every day has been as positive. We've had setbacks, moments of reverting to old patterns, flare-ups of defensiveness or entitlement." Dr. Walker reminds us that decades of relationship dynamics don't transform overnight. But the difference now is our commitment to working through these moments rather than avoiding them. The most profound change has been in our honesty with each other. I no longer pretend that Stephanie's dismissive behavior doesn't hurt me. She no longer pretends that my financial support isn't significant. We're learning to see each other clearly, not as the idealized mother and daughter of our imaginations, but as real women with strengths, flaws, needs, and boundaries. Yesterday, Stephanie called with news. "We're thinking about starting a family," she said, excitement in her voice. "And Mom, I want our children to know the real you. Not some sanitized grandmother figure, but the strong, hard-working woman who sacrificed so much. I want them to know where they come from." It was perhaps the most healing moment of all. The acknowledgement that my value in her life, and in her future children's lives, wouldn't be determined by what I could provide materially, but by who I am. As I reflect on these past months, I realize that what happened with the bank account wasn't really about money at all. It was about finding the courage to demand respect at an age when many women become increasingly invisible. It was about recognizing that true love between parent and child must include mutual respect, not just affection or obligation. And it was about the painful but necessary process of breaking unhealthy patterns so that healthier ones could grow in their place. I'm grateful that my relationship with Stephanie has survived this difficult period. Not just survived, but begun to transform into something more authentic than what we had before. We're not perfect. We still stumble. But we're facing each other honestly now, and that makes all the difference. For any parents watching who recognize your own struggles in my story, I hope you take away this. It's never too late to establish boundaries. It's never too late to require respect. And it's never too late to build a healthier relationship with your adult children, one based on mutual respect, rather than one-sided sacrifice. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to take a difficult stand to improve a family relationship? What helped you find the courage to do it? Leave a comment below and share your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships, boundaries, and finding your voice at any age. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, respect is not just for the young. It's something we all deserve at every stage of life.